This is what went on last night in Philadelphia. I personally think that we need this right now with the coronavirus and everything else that's been going on this year. I personally think that we need this just about as badly as we need another hole put in our heads. These disturbances that I'm looking at for 2020 has escalated and increased pertaining to unrest here in America. And if you'll listen to a commentator and who they're interviewing, verifies that it's only adding insult to misery in regards to these types of resistant movements that are basically plaguing America with destruction of property damage and human casualties. Please listen. This is sad.
Including the female sergeant hit by a truck. She is in stable condition right now with a broken leg.
Protesters looting, throwing bricks and rocks at officers, and setting a police cruiser on fire.
The unrest starting when officers responded to a domestic disturbance call. Police say Walter Wallace Jr. approached two officers with a knife and ignored orders to drop it before shots were fired.
Both officers involved have been taken off duty for the investigation. Joining me now to react is former NYPD Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher. Dr. Porcher, unfortunately, we're having this conversation again. A lot happening in the city of Philadelphia this morning. If people are now just waking up, I know that you've, read details. You saw the video that we just had there on the air a second ago. What do you make of this situation so far?
This is troubling and it's problematic because we need to refer back to the teachable moments in connection with the aftermath after George Floyd had passed away. We had riots that plagued the country in places like New York, Seattle, Portland, and Chicago, and it was to no avail. What it amounted to was property damage and further socioeconomic impoverishment in these areas. And so when we look to what's happened in Philadelphia, it's not taking us to a plausible solution. It's actually separating us and bringing us to a worse place.
Dr. Porcher, let me ask you, how are officers trained to respond if someone is coming at them with a knife?
Well, traditionally, what you want to do is you want to, neutralize the threat as quickly and as safely as possible. Now, many people speak to the introduction of a taser into this equation. But when we look at the video in this particular encounter, the officers didn't really have much time nor space to act. Therefore, the firearm is what these officers felt was the most plausible mechanism to use to neutralize the situation. So when we go back to the training perspective, the training merely focuses on using the lowest level of force possible. However, when we look at this particular interaction or engagement, the firearm seemed as if it was the best course of action to keep the officers safe.
I've been in contact with the Philadelphia.
Now, once more, why couldn't they have had some sort of a net that they could have shot out on this guy to have, restrained him, or even a tranquilizer gun towards restraining this individual? How come they had, I guess they wasted this individual because he was upset, he had a knife, and he was acting unruly. You got to keep in mind, whenever you're involved in an alteration, it doesn't matter if it's with a wife, a husband, a brother, an uncle, a cousin, or a stranger, a friend, or somebody that you thought was your friend. At that point in time, you got so much adrenaline going in your mind and in your body, you're not thinking straight. You're going to say things that you don't mean, and you're possibly even going to do things that you ordinarily never would do. So you're dealing with somebody basically that's at the point of retardation. Whenever you're dealing with somebody with this many emotions going on, that has just got through having a domestic squabble with, I guess, their lover, their companion. I don't know what it was over. Who knows? May have been over a bill. May have been over something that she bought right before the coronavirus hit that he disapproved of, and now he's throwing it up at her. And now, one word led to another to the point that it turned into a fight. But the bottom line is this: how come our professional agencies out there that are supposed to be sworn to protect us can't do a better job in regards to somebody holding a butcher knife? I mean, unless the individual is within arm's distance of you and they're actually engaging towards coming at you, which maybe they can validate in some of the film here, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, how come it takes somebody to get wasted over something so, I hate to use the word innocent, because he did have a weapon in his hand, but something so low rate that just about anybody with the right equipment could have been able to contain this individual other than wasting him. Life is precious. Everybody makes mistakes, especially in the heat of the moment. How come law enforcement cannot design something, a better method in taking an individual like this down without having to take their life? That's my question. It is so sad.
Philadelphia Police Department all night long. 30 officers have been injured, as we have been reporting. We know that a female officer was hit by a truck in one of the streets there, it seemed, in West Philadelphia. You see these numbers here. As an officer, how are you approaching your job today if you're in Philadelphia?
This is a very tough situation for an officer in not just Philadelphia, but any of the major cities throughout the country in the wake of the violence that's been plaguing the nation. So an officer in Philadelphia basically has to keep their head on swivel. And the goal is not just to keep that officer safe, but the population that they serve as a whole. Police officers are the first line of defense for society. Therefore, as a result, we need to lend deference to what police officers do to ensure the safety of that population. And it's a very troubling narrative that's occurring in Philadelphia, but I'm confident that the police department will subsequently maintain a level of order, because order is what's necessary to keep that society afloat moving forward.
Yeah, you made a good point. You said, not just Philadelphia, because we did see over the summer, it just seemed like the riots went from city to city, and we're going to, a lot of people waking up this morning in that city and beyond, just, wondering how this is going to play out now. Dr. Porcher, thank you for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jillian.
Jillian, new polling reveals a majority.
And I guess I'm going to throw this in there too. Whenever you have a president that incites violence in the way that he revs up and rallies up the people, kind of like Joe Osteen, not Joe Osteen, but Jerry Springer up in Chicago, the way that he would take his audience and rev them up. Whenever you have all these different combinations pertaining to people not having money, people not being able to pay their bills, people may have been laid off because of the coronavirus, people not knowing which way to vote, people having all these other issues going on, whenever you, and people being waxed with all these drug addiction problems here in America, You have a recipe of a perfect storm, of a catastrophe. When are we as Americans going to say we need to do something different whenever it comes to domestic violence? It is so sad to lead down the road of an individual actually losing their life over something stupid. Kind of like the deal that happened with Atlanta whenever that individual was drinking and he fell asleep at the wheel and he freaked out. I don't know what happened. I don't know if he had been doing drugs along with alcohol, but he freaked out and he broke loose. And the only way that those cops could contain that individual at that point in time was to shoot him in the back while he was running from them. Knowing good and well that he wasn't going to get away, they'd already had the car and the car keys. If he was going to get away, it wasn't going to be too far. He may have wound up going over to another street or two. But why do they have to lay in with such force, lethal force? There was another incident where an individual supposedly had a knife. This individual had already got into his automobile. And the cop shot, 7 shots in the guy's back just to restrain him. Why are we seeing this again and again and again? That causes people to go on an uproar. It causes society to become unrest. Is that what we want to see? Do we want to see all this unrest? Do we want to see broken out windows and burning and looting and tearing up stuff because of this? My point is there has to be another solution to the problem other than laying into somebody and wasting them. Regardless of what the circumstances may be, there has to be another solution. Because individuals, once they get so hyped up, and I don't know if this individual was drinking, I don't know if this individual had drugs in his system or not, but the odds are 6-1, he probably did. And if you'll combine that with emotions, anger, possibly fear, rage, once more you have a formula of domestic violence. Something breaking loose. And we're seeing more and more of this. But to waste the individual that has a knife. He didn't have a gun. He didn't even have anything that looked like a gun. He had a knife. I just don't see it. I don't see, how come they couldn't have shot that individual in the foot? How come they couldn't have shot him in the hand that he was holding the knife with? How come they had to lay into him? That's my point. That's my whole point. Good luck to us all as we're staring down the barrel. Looks like both barrels right here at this election with all these troubles. So sad. That may have been a family man that had responsibilities. But usually, ordinarily, it's being seen right there. But usually, whenever they go to putting up those stoppers with numbers on them, usually there was a death. You're looking at a crime scene. a crime scene that escalated into police brutality if the police officers would have handled that a little differently, or if the police officers would have had the right equipment to have handled that differently. That's the part that I keep mentioning again and again and again, pertaining to police officers should have the right to carry some sort of another instrument or two that they can choose from, other than having to go directly to the gun that usually has the same ending consequences. So sad.